Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and welcome back to Black American Lineage. The journey through our past and present is very exciting. So, thank you for going on this journey, and thank you for all you do to support the channel. Today, I'm going to talk about the natives, the indigenous people, people that we usually refer to as Indians, and the Buffalo Soldiers. Buffalo Soldiers were United States Army regiments composed exclusively of Black American soldiers formed during the 19th century to serve on the American frontier. On September 21st, 1866, the 10th Cavalry Regiment was formed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. The nickname Buffalo Soldiers was purportedly given to the regiments by the Native American tribes who fought against them during the American Indian Wars, and the term eventually became synonymous with all of the Black American regiments that were established in 1866, including the 9th Cavalry Regiment, 10th Cavalry Regiment, 24th Infantry Regiment, 25th Infantry Regiment, and 38th Infantry Regiment. So there were a number of regiments of Buffalo Soldiers. Now, it needs to be noted that these men were first recruited during the Civil War. Most of these men were slaves or free blacks, but most of them were enslaved. But what happened was that during the Civil War, the South was winning the war, which means that the United States of America was losing the war. They had the most soldiers, they had the most weapons, the most sophisticated weapons, but the South had the fighting spirit because they were trying to hold on to those slaves. One of the white historians said that those white people would have sent the last member of their family to that war to hold on to those slaves. So they were fighting to win that war so that slavery would continue. Abraham Lincoln, who was president of the United States, did not want the slaves to join the army because he thought they wouldn't fight. Frederick Douglass and other black leaders kept saying, let them fight. Let them fight for their own freedom because that war, the outcome of that war, would eventually determine the freedom of those black people. So after the United States Army kept losing, and after the generals, Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman told Lincoln, let them fight. They have a greater reason to fight than anybody. Lincoln finally agreed to let the enslaved men join the army. The women also joined. They were the cooks, they did the laundry, and they were also spies. So those black men had to throw down those cotton sacks and throw down those holes from chopping cotton and pick up rifles and start fighting for their freedom. They were not trained to be soldiers, they were slaves, but they turned out to be some pretty good soldiers because after they got in the fight, the North started winning, and eventually the North won the war and the enslaved people were freed. And everybody agrees that the black men made a difference. Chuck it down to a carb, they outfought the white soldiers. The black soldiers fought so courageously during the Civil War that after the war they formed those cavalry regiments and sent them out west to fight with the United States Army against the indigenous people. The United States Army had been fighting against those Indians since the 1700s, and they had not been able to defeat them. So it took the Buffalo Soldiers to go out there, and eventually they were defeated. Now, let us remember that those indigenous people were also holding black people enslaved. I guess they were trying to get along with the white people and they were going along with the white people's program. So they were enslaving black people too. That has to be noted because a lot of people don't know that. Now let's bring it up to date. The indigenous people are upset with Beyonce because she wore a t-shirt on Juneteenth talking about the Buffalo Soldiers and their conquests. So listen to this.
Hello. It has come to my attention that there is some confusion surrounding the Buffalo Soldier shirt that Beyonce wore on Juneteenth. Just to recap real quick, Juneteenth is the day that slaves in the state of Texas found out over 2 years late that they were actually free. And on Juneteenth, Beyonce wore this Buffalo Soldier shirt, which has sparked a bit of controversy, not because of the front, but because of the wording on the back. In particular, said on the back of the shirt, the antagonists were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement. Warring Indians, bandits, cattle thieves, murderous gunmen, bootlegger, trespasser, and Mexican revolutionaries. And a lot of people have felt as if this statement is very inappropriate, especially in our current environment. You should know a couple things. There's a Buffalo Soldier Museum in Houston celebrating these men who were a part of some of the first Black troops in the U.S. Army. What you should also know is that the Buffalo Soldiers were disenfranchised in the same way that the Native Americans were. And while they did fight against them, you should also know there were Native American slave owners. Very complicated part of our history. The same way the Buffalo Soldiers being a part of an army, when literally they were a part of the army during the Civil War in a country where they were still disenfranchised. Many of the people they were fighting, in particular, prominent members of the 5 so-called civilized tribes, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw Creek, and Seminole, owned slaves. History is very complicated. Very. So while I get people may not have liked the back of that shirt, I understand it. I understand why. The nuance with which you are looking at their actions right now does not really accurately reflect the historical context of what they were dealing with when they were in the army. These are disenfranchised people, barely living with new freedoms that were swiftly taken away, by the way. They were often fighting against people who have been slave owners. More importantly, they're taking their directives from people who have more rights than them. I just think it's important to realize that. But if you want to die on the hill about this shirt, that's your business. I just thought I would share this historical context because I do think it's important.
Well, the indigenous people are running around like they have the moral high ground. First of all, the Buffalo Soldiers were in the army. They were not acting on their own. They were acting on orders of the United States Army. But now they never get mad at white people. Oh, they want the Buffalo Soldiers to be stripped of all of their honors. There is a Buffalo Soldiers Museum in Houston, Texas, dedicated to the gallantry of those Buffalo Soldiers. See, they want to erase the history of the Buffalo Soldiers because the Buffalo Soldiers participated in their defeat. But they were fighting the United States Army, not the Buffalo Soldiers.
Beyonce's Buffalo Soldier shirt. What do I have to say about it as a Native person? What I have to say about it is that I think that you should donate to a missing and murdered Indigenous Women's Resource Center, such as the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women or the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. There's also places like Not Our Native Daughters that work to end the violence that Native women suffer on a regular basis.
How come there's no awareness on who commit these violent acts against Native American women? Because 90% of the people who commit these crimes against them are men. Correction, 96% of those people who commit acts against Native American women are men. And most of these men get away with it. How about applying pressure to the federal government? Because what can Beyonce really do about it? As far as the Buffalo Soldiers, what about the Native Americans that went on slave patrol? You had Native American bounty hunters working for white slave owners and getting rewarded for capturing fugitive slaves. And not to mention, they had their own slave patrols. Native Americans had their own slave patrols because they were slave owners. And they fought for the Confederacy. The Confederacy was paying them money for scalping black Union soldiers. They were getting paid for scalping black Union soldiers and runaway slaves. It's funny how y'all pick and choose for whatever's convenient for y'all. And with that, not just Native American women, but justice for all women who are victims to acts of violence committed by men.
And then there's this.
So this person is asking me about the history of the Buffalo Soldiers and the real reason why the Buffalo Soldiers were upset with the natives. Well, let me explain. Let me put you into the mindset of a black Buffalo Soldier at that time. The white people let you go. The Native Americans didn't. They didn't respect federal law. They didn't respect the 13th Amendment. All kinds of deals had to be made. Now, when you look at when the Buffalo Soldiers were actually made, were actually formed, they were formed in 1860. And I said the Cherokee didn't release their slaves until 1863, but actually it wasn't really until 1866 as well. So when you look at the proximity, You look at the fact that the Comanche, the Apache, I mean, literally every tribe that the Buffalo Soldiers went after owned slaves, and then we weren't compensated. And then some of those tribes who were still holding black slaves at that time. Did you know that? That was passed down too. Put yourself in their shoes at that point.
And he's stating facts. It's very interesting how people, when they're on the losing end of something, try to play the victim. They are complicit with white people in the enslavement of black people. Matter of fact, they held black people enslaved after the war ended and the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment were in play. So they really don't have a leg to stand on when they start talking about the Buffalo Soldiers and what the Buffalo Soldiers did and trying to hold Beyonce accountable for what the Buffalo Soldiers did. I don't know if that's what they're trying to do, but they need to leave it alone because their hands are not clean either. So this is what's going on with the natives and the Buffalo Soldiers. Let me know what you think about the video. Thank you for listening and have a good evening.